Good morning. Normally we have to shush everyone up, but you won't have to me this morning. Thanks for coming. Lovely to see your smiling faces, or imagine them under your mask anyway.
Smile with their eyes.
I'd like for us all to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Wiradjuri people, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to introduce Rachel Croker, who looks after all of our events here. She does a great job behind the scenes and pulls it all together. So give Rachel a round of applause. Thanks, Rach. She loves the limelight. I'd also like to introduce you to Rhiannon Vanessa up in the back corner there. She's taken on the communications role here with us and has been with us for a couple of months doing a great job. If you've got any questions or feedback, you're welcome to provide that to any of us, including myself, Lisa Hasty. A special welcome to our board members. If you'd like to introduce yourself, those that are here, we'll start with you, Alex.
Hi, Alex, very nice to see you. Already know, I'm independent wine merchant for Wellington. Moved up here in 1989. This is my second term on board, and absolutely love it. It's quite a growing group, and I'm here for small business because I'm in the small business, and I probably understand it a little bit close to most people like this. Yeah, welcome everybody.
Oh, here he is, Steve Owens.
Steve Owens, I work in our business and have a company called the Chat. So they might be been on board now for 2 years, so it's been great and small.
Yeah, Barry Young.
Yeah, hi, Barry. Yeah, thanks. Actually, CBD, Albury Wodonga, I've traded in the box, so anything traders would like to talk to me about will be CBD.
Our board are all volunteers and really do contribute a lot to what we do. If you've got any feedback or anything you'd like to raise with them, please do so. We want to make Albury Business Connect something that you guys really value. A special welcome to Councillor Alice Blacken. Where's Alice? She swapped seats. Normally she's over here. Hi, Alice. We have Angela Larkin from Albury City. Ange, good morning. Anthony McFarlane from Business New South Wales. Welcome, Anthony. And a special welcome to the member for Albury, Justin Clancy. Welcome, Justin. We have a number of sponsors in the room and a lovely sponsors banner here. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Clayton, and those who are also sponsors in the room. Our banner looks full, but we can get a bigger banner. So if anyone's interested in throwing some sponsorship dollars their way, I'd be happy to have a conversation about that. This morning we have RSM presenting. However, the presenter has sick children and unwell himself. So considering the current environment, he's made the wise decision. He isn't able to make it today. What we'd like to do is welcome Justin Clancy, Anthony McFarlane and our chair, Barry Young, up to the stage here. And we thought we'd open up to the floor around COVID restrictions and any questions you might have about what's going on in the environment at the moment. So give these guys about 10 minutes and then we'll introduce Albury Wodonga Health.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Justin and Anthony for welcoming this opportunity to have a bit of a chat this morning. Unnoticed, so yeah, lots of questions without notice. These guys are professional question answers, you know, they'll answer questions. So we just want to get some feedback from the community, our business community, about what conditions are like, what we can do as a board, as a government, and also as Business New South Wales to help assist business. So we'll just throw it open to you guys to answer, throw some questions at us. We'll do our best to answer them, acknowledge them, and see what we can do to help. That's what we're here for, is to help. So please, we're happy to take some questions from the floor.
Justin, are you happy just to give us a little bit more of a brief overview of the restrictions, what we can and can't do from Albury individually?
Yeah, thanks, Alex, and I can defer to you know, Anthony might have
in terms of the operational sides of things. But as it stands, obviously Victoria lifted the stay, what in New South Wales would call the stay-at-home orders yesterday. Now, whenever that goes into place, whenever that stay-at-home goes into place, New South Wales reflects that through its own public health order and lists Victoria as an area of concern. So in that regard, that will hopefully have been lifted as well in that regard. The reason for doing that is all the way along is New South Wales, I suppose the thinking was that if you had a stay-at-home order in Victoria but did not reciprocate that in New South Wales, that you're creating a pull or draw factor across to New South Wales in that regard. So they set that up. In my view, it's important to make sure that they release that in a timely fashion as well. And we've been in situations previously where it hasn't been as timely as it ought to be. So Victoria, obviously, regional reasons to stay at home have lifted. New South Wales in that regard, but having said that, Victoria still has in place their zone restrictions for New South Wales coming into Victoria. And at the end of the day, that remains in place, and that remains something that obviously impacts significantly on our community, particularly, just talking to Barry before, particularly in terms of that tightening of restrictions that we experienced over the last 3 to 4 weeks, both in terms of restriction of that zone area, but also in terms of the permitted reasons to travel across. And I think that's really what is contributing to a lot of hurt in that regard. Now, for me, that's a shared responsibility. I want to make sure that from our government's perspective, we're engaging in that regard, because we need to, I think, talking to Barry, I think we appreciate that there will be levels of border restrictions in place. What those restrictions are and how they're policed are two important matters. I think the way Victoria Police have been engaging in the operations with that sort of soft border has been much better for our community than harder policing. But in terms of restrictions, if we can return to a situation like we were a month ago, where we had an expanded area, communities like Lockhart, Murrumbidgee could travel across, and we're talking only small regional communities in that regard, but they've got a few dozen people who for them, that travelling that border is significant. And I'll talk to allied health staff, workers, business owners, things like that. They're impacted. But then obviously the permitted reasons for travelling within that border, I think that's really important just for that as well.
Thanks.
Justin, is there opportunities for us as a community to, I guess, pressure the Victorian government in terms of reassessing the border bubble movement as they have with opening up regional Victoria again? And I know they rely on health advice, and I'm sure all the longer health would support the argument that the health, I guess, crisis extends well beyond COVID, that there's a mental health element to this as well. And we know that businesses are probably doing it tougher this lockdown than they have, or this restriction than they had previously. So is there a consideration that we can push, other than Facebook brands or whatever it might be, about applying some pressure to the Victorian government from our point of view to reassess that border bubble restriction?
Absolutely, Barry. I think for me, I suppose my own personal view is touching on what, at the end of the day, when we talk pressure, it's got to be constructive. It's, at the end of the day, I think any decision maker is going to respond to that proactive, constructive engagement in that regard. That's my personal view. I also recognise that there is an important need for different levels of engagement in that regard. But my own view from last year, in the depths of the border closure, is any channel, and I'd actively encourage. We direct conversations up through our channel and do what we can to advocate on behalf of our community. But I think, and a good example of that is Gary Zorner with the construction industry the other day. What are we doing through Master Builders Association? What are we doing through the construction industry to be pushing the point, letting the decision makers know of how our community is being impacted in that regard? So I'm a big believer in utilising as many channels as we can to get that message in a constructive way, at the table, at the desk of the decision makers.
Actually, what are your thoughts around?
I think there's certainly scope to expand the reasons under the specified worker permit to sort of free up, like, you know, for example, we're seeing some of our members not being able to get in the aged care space, physios and health workers residing in Wodonga up to Wagga, and, you know, construction's another gap in that permit system. But I think at the moment that is catered for trade and logistics and agriculture. So we've been pushing to try and broaden that, and the Victorian Cross-Border Commissioner's aware of some of those examples. But yeah, like the other bit of, you know, the room for improvement that we also see, we thought we were getting extremely close to aligning the two definitions of the border bubble before it was redefined or burst, as they say. Yeah, like you feel like you're getting there, you know, one step forward, two steps back on a few of these things. But yeah, like I think the restrictions, I think it's we're at 10 now for reasons for crossing. Like our main concern is certainly, you know, not being able to cross over for, you know, dining and hospitality type reasons, and the impacts that has on the visitor economy is probably what we're keeping an eye on, and making sure that those stories and case studies are getting back to Sydney in particular.
Is there any feedback, and maybe even from some of the accountants like Clayton, about the assistance that's been made available and how effective the rollout of that assistance has been? Have you got any commentary around that, Clayton?
I think the key for me is just to make sure everyone is aware that it's there. So Anthony probably has a little bit to say on it, but is everyone aware that there's the grants available to everyone? Small business owners, they've now, something earlier on Friday, expanded it also, it's gotten bigger and more easy to access for everyone. So new businesses can now access it the dates before the 27th of May. So you can now compare 2019, 2020 and 2021. So it's from Friday, it's a lot more open. Before that was more restricted. You might have talked to your accountant last week. Well, it's probably changed again this week. So hopefully it's got a lot faster, a lot quicker, but Anthony had some numbers. Maybe he could mention them.
Yeah. We've Alice?
I wanted to ask, Kate referred to newer businesses.
Yeah.
And I know that businesses had to be, when the first lockdown started, so we're talking over a year ago now, businesses had to be in place for over a year. How has that changed? You've mentioned the newer. How new and what opportunities are there? Because over that 18 months, there've been a significant number of new businesses started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with that new change where you can have a 2020 comparison.
Which one?
2021. I'm thinking that maybe they've relaxed it. It was 2 years, but maybe they've brought it in with these changes to 1 year. But I think for the decline in turnover test, you would need a comparison period. So I would have thought at the very least you need a 3 month, 2-3 month periods to compare. But I don't think they have. But my understanding is that the government has to draw a line somewhere in terms of being able to demonstrate a loss. Otherwise, you would have people starting up and just claiming straight away. So there is that element to it. But I think, to Clayton's point, the where we started off in terms of those grants and where we are now, it's been a considerable widening. In terms of the overall numbers, I checked in last night, there's been about 200,000 applications received. 44,000 have now been processed. So this is the micro grant, which is for businesses that turn over between 30 and 75 grand. The second type of grant is a business support grant, which is for over 75,000 up to, I think, is it 50 million now, maybe it's 250. And then also JobSaver, which is a weekly payroll type payment if you've kept your staff on as of, I think, around the 13th of July. So they're throwing, and Justin might be able to talk to this a bit more, more resources at clearing the backlog of applications. And very aware of the need to get cash flow out the door.
I think, yes, there is that recognition that needs to be improved in that regard, Anthony. But the other comment I was going to say, and this is an important point, Alice, because you raise a good point. You know, there's boundaries on any grant program. Please encourage you still to submit. There is a manual assessment process as well. So there is a process there to recognise that sometimes a business may not fit within the actual program guidelines as they are, and there's an opportunity to explore and have a manual consideration of your business and circumstances in that regard. So, sorry,
Just backing up what Justin said there. So some people might have remembered last year, if you're a Victorian business that operated in New South Wales, you got denied, whereas this year, submit it and you put in that manual review and it might get through anyway, because there are some businesses that only operate in New South Wales, but they're registered in Victoria because that's where people live. So there are some of those nuances that they've fixed in this grant that will allow us to hopefully continue on and employ people.
Alice?
So is it possible for the chambers to send more information out to all the members for some of the changes and some of the areas, for examples, out to people so that we know what things we might be able to apply for, and as we're talking to other people in the community, other businesses, we might be able to help them as well.
Yeah, we'll keep bringing out that information as it comes to hand. We'll just keep feeding that out through our communication networks, absolutely. And also we'll, I think we're going to conduct another survey, I think, Lisa, just asking some of those questions as well about where people need help, whether they need assistance, so they have trouble finding the correct help. And not only economic, but also in terms of mental health aspects as well. We need to be aware that we need to offer support, not only economically, but also for health reasons as well. So we'll make those connections, we'll make sure people are aware. But as a community, I would ask for people to keep an eye out for people in our community that are doing it tough, but they won't necessarily put their hand up, but we can provide assistance, we can provide help in a non-threatening way, that we can put an arm around and say, you know, we can help. So encourage everyone to look out for those that may need a little bit of help in that space as well.
can I just add to that too? I think Lisa might touch on it, but what personnel groups done in conjunction with the chamber in that regard, in terms of the website and giving, I suppose, a forum for to reach out and to know what tools are available in that regard. And I think that's really important this time. For me, and I'd imagine we're going to hear much more important people in just a moment, Lisa, but I also want to, and I talked to Barry just before, it's my view that we have this unique position in regional areas at the moment where we've got a window to be as prepared as we can be. And in that regard, last week we had a meeting between Albury Wodonga Health, Murrumbidgee Health, and local mayors and local general managers to be assured of the work that goes in terms of advanced planning from our health agencies. I do want to thank Albury Wodonga Health, and I want to thank Murrumbidgee Health, because in the background there is a lot of preparation from a health perspective to this. They have also stood up what we call the local emergency management committees, and that is a collaboration between council and our emergency services, police. So again, that preparation goes in place. But in terms of our community being prepared, I'll continue to emphasise the point about vaccination. I think as business owners, that's really crucial as well, because we know how important it is to really start getting to a point where we can have easing of restrictions, and a big part of that is vaccination. For me, in a regional setting, that's crucial. So not just communities like Albury, but for me, and I was saying Barry, our smaller communities, our Henties, Colcans, Jerilderies, Tumbarumbas, the last thing I want to see is that this pandemic impacts severely on those communities. Really is the message there is getting vaccinated in that regard. So if I can encourage everyone to continue that message, we'll certainly continue advocating in terms of lifting those restrictions, in particular those severe impacts on the border. But I think the message for me is we've got this unique position. Let's be as prepared as we can be.
Okay, I think we might wrap up. Thanks to Anthony, Business New South Wales, and you know, Anthony's really pushing the case for the region very strongly. We really appreciate it, and I'd encourage everyone to respond to any surveys that Business New South Wales might put out, because that data is really useful in building a case for the region. So please contribute where you can, and thanks again to Justin for the work you're doing to continue to push for our region. So thank you both. Appreciate you coming up at short notice, and yeah, much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Thank you, Justin, Anthony and Barry, and appreciate the questions and information that came through. Thank you, Clayton. We will work on providing a survey, and as Barry said, if you can complete those, that does give us the information and data that we can use and then push up the line. So we'll arrange to get that out for you. Just touching on the Better Place project, that was an initiative by Albury Business Connect and the personnel group run last year, and we ran a bit of a survey to assess the mental wellbeing and how people were feeling, particularly after border closures. It came back with some pretty staggering figures of 47% of people felt not in control of their mental health. Barry touched on that, you know, people may be feeling things even more so now. So that website is live, betterplaceproject.com.au, and it provides a list of resources nationally, but also locally, where people can go to get advice and help. So we encourage you to help spread the word on that. We will also be running another survey assessing how people are feeling in October this year. So I know surveys, they do come around a fair bit, but we really do appreciate you completing those for us. All right, let's move on. I'd like to welcome Albury Wodonga Health, who will be updating us on their master plan. We've got an order of speakers. I might just get them all up. You have? Matt, you're first. All right. Come on up, Matt. Matt is the board chair of Albury Wodonga Health. Will he be followed by Michael? Oh, mixing it up like that. David Clancy, the Director of Emergency and Intensive Care Services, and Michael Kalimnios. Close, sorry. The Albury Wodonga CEO. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you to the Albury Business Connect for giving us this opportunity to speak to you this morning. But I acknowledge firstly Justin Clancy, not because he's a mate of mine, but for the work that he does on behalf of the community, on behalf of our hospital. Even though he's one half of the equation, we need to get the same sort of level of effort. And I don't say this lightly, but out of the other side of the border, which is in Victoria. I acknowledge Alice and Graham, Doxy, two people from council, and all of your lovely people from Albury Business Connect. And a name not mentioned is Dr. Barbara Robertson, who's sitting in the corner. She's our Director of Perioperative Services. So that's our team this morning. I'm going to introduce our topic. Of course, this is a community update. Where's it come from? We've had a pretty extensive last year digging up, as I call it, and getting all the information of our clinical services plan. What it is that we're currently doing in terms of giving you that medical specialist care. Use hospital parlances. Yes, we're bleeding, we're hemorrhaging, we actually need major surgery. But that's the stage we're at. So that service plan has been done. The next phase now is the master plan, which is what we're going to talk about today. We need to engage the community. We need to engage you as business leaders here on this side of the border and on the other side, Rotary, Lines, anybody and everybody, to get them to support our impetus to get a one health service on the border. Let's go and not become yabbies and become territorial as to whether it's to be in Albury or Wodonga, we don't care where it is. We know what we want. The data is telling us, and you'll see some stats in a minute, where we're heading. And we've got these good doctors that are trying to do the best they can, and their hands are tied. And we've got to untie that so they can do what they're paid to do to give you that best healthcare service, or in our case, to be Australia's leading regional health service. So if I could just get the next on here. So this one, do?
Yep, is it turn on?
Hang on. I've got these now.
Yeah, but is the clicker itself. Okay.
By the way, it's been 365 days yesterday since we've had a COVID case on the border, just that I've taken that here. Oh, Dan, sorry, no. Stop being cheeky, mate. You might lose. Right, so caring for our cross-border community. We have quite a large footprint. We're not just Albury Wodonga. The name probably suggests that, but it's beyond Albury Wodonga, almost down to Benalla, up in the hills, and we do go into New South Wales a fair bit as well. So we do have a primary and secondary and a regional catchment area. People come in for all sorts of things. We take our cancer services. People come in from Shepparton. They can easily turn right and go to Melbourne, but they choose to come in because there's no traffic lights, except for one that you might get caught up at Burke Road. Otherwise, this is where they come. So, as it says, we're a cross-border service. We are managed by the Victorian Department of Health. There was an agreement back in the day, 11 years ago, between the New South Wales government and the Victorian government to make it and hand the power into Victoria to manage this place. So we are the Victorian model of care health. We're funded through an intergovernmental agreement that is signed by both ministers of health that supports their budgetary processes, that gives us a 50-50 split of what they have to support us with. This is a very important point. If you look at the Victorian model of care, look at Ballarat, Bendigo and the Golden Valley, we are the second largest regional health service in Victoria. The largest one than us is at Geelong, Vale Health. They've got an amalgamation of a number of smaller hospitals around them. That's why they're pretty big. And I'll show you an interesting stat later of how close we come to them in terms of health. What's going on? Of course, we do provide a wide range of community and hospital-based services. I think you know that. We're flat out all the time. We operate from 21 sites across our catchment. And we do have a lot of mental health facilities as well, as you well know. And of course, a really large cancer service operating here on the border, which is after it was established within 6 months, it outgrew itself. That's the demand that happens. So we've got to be like the Chinese. Don't think 50 years, you've got to think 100 years ahead. That's what we've got to do in this day and age. Okay, so we need to plan for our future, and that's why the master plan is well underway. And once again, thanks to Justin for pushing us on that and providing some funding to get it underway. These things don't come cheap. We don't have a lot of money. Of course, growing and aging, you're going to get chronic diseases, sadly, whether we like it or not. Our catchment is going to increase in the next 15 to 20 years by 30%. That's very, very significant. When you look at our catchment now, it's about 300,000. It's going to be way beyond that. 65 plus, that's my age group, sadly. We're going to account for 82% in this catchment area. ED presentations have been predicted to be 150,000. We currently have 71,300 today as we speak. Now, I talked about Barwon Health. They have 72,301, 1,000 more than us. Their population is 500,000 catchment. We're 279,000. So just when you look at some stats, we're very, very significant in what we do here. 80,000 missions, that's double. We're predicting twice as many. David's flat out now. He's got no hair. He's got to have no hair. Okay, 3 times our surgeries, 13,600 to 40,000. These are staggering figures, right? This has come out from in-depth research. We've got 1,700 babies currently born on average a year. They're predicted to go to 1,900. Need 3 times that again for intensive care patients. And pediatric will be almost double, or a bit more than double. So we really have to plan for that. And that clinical services plan has now told us what we need to do. This is all the data that's coming out of it. We need to now look at the infrastructure that's going to be needed to support those operations, how and where this jigsaw will fit, how many theatres we need, how many beds we need, all of those sort of things. I think enough for me. I think the next you're going to hear is this lovely man, David Clancy.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak today. And before I kick off, I just wanted to acknowledge the discussion before and the impact on you all and the business community of what's occurring and the stress and strain that creates. So just wanted to acknowledge that and thinking of you all, of the implications of decisions that are made in the city. The small to medium business is the bedrock of our economy and our community and our society, and we will see implications of this down the track. So I just wanted to acknowledge the pain and the hurt that all of you must be feeling at the moment. The clinical services plan for Albury Wodonga Health has been 12 months in the making, and it has been shaped by the community of our clinical practice around us. It's our clinical specialists that have informed this, and it's also the community expectations and our community buy-in that has built what we need to do for the next 20 years. There are three major tenets to where we've come to for this plan until 2040. And really, we're looking at three tenets of safety and quality of care, access to care that's closer to home, and also regional leadership. Safety and quality of care is the most important thing to us as clinicians. We continue to run the untenable risk of running two small sub-regional hospitals that are over capacity and are a mere 7 kilometres apart. That risk is created because we stretch our resources across two campuses and we duplicate resources while also one side of the river may miss out on a service compared to the other. The other part of our quality and safety of care is increasing our outpatient services. There is a disconnect between what we do in the hospital and keeping people out of hospital. And we need to improve our services as an outpatient setting that Albury Wodonga Health provides to ensure that we're providing care after you leave hospital or even preventing you needing to come into hospital at all. The best way to save a life in a hospital is to prevent the hospital admission. Okay, and we need to do better for our community, improving our outpatient services. So that's where we need to increase our patient flow, getting people out home earlier, but also creating a single regional health service here on the border. Access to care closer to home. Simply what we're trying to do here is prevent having to fly patients out and prevent having to fly doctors in. We really want to be able to build our services locally so that you don't have to go to a metropolitan area or your loved one as well. We've seen the impact of that even more so during this time of COVID, where we've had to have visitor restrictions, people have had to be flown down to Melbourne and can't be supported by their families. The best thing that we can do for our community is provide the care here. So that's going to be an increase of complexity of care. There's going to be an increase of services. We're talking about increasing our neonatal intensive care capacity. That will mean that we can maintain more high-risk deliveries, preemie babies locally. We've already got a cardiac cath lab, but it's increasing that service to be operational 24 hours a day, so that if you come in with a heart attack, straight away, we can get you in and get the blockage in your artery fixed. And the last point in that is the increase in trauma services. Now, trauma requires many hands. Okay? You need surgical services, you need intensive care services, you need a better emergency department, you need more theatre capacity, and you need more utilities within that theatre. So while that may just seem a small component, that is actually a big, wide-ranging service that we'll need to have, including a retrieval service, so that we can actually pick up patients a lot sooner and get them to hospital quicker. And our last component is our regional leadership. We want to be the regional solution for regional people. We increase our scope of services we will provide to a greater region. Okay. But it's also creating partnerships. We want to talk about a principal referral hospital that will provide services from Wagga down to Shepparton. But what we need to do when we consider that is also create partnerships. And that'll be partnerships with private hospitals, partnerships with tertiary facilities, partnerships with other outpatient services, and also with our smaller regional, sub-regional hospitals. By any measure, Albury Wodonga Health punches above its weight. If you compare us to other regional services, we have a median population compared to Barwon, but we're up there in between Ballarat and Bendigo. We see more emergency presentations across the two campuses than either of those facilities. And in reality, we actually see more emergency presentations than many metropolitan centres. Our admissions are less than Bendigo, largely as a result of our surgical capacity, and yet our infrastructure is a lot less in terms of theatres. Our births are actually higher than other regional centres. But across the board, Albury Wodonga Health has lacked in terms of infrastructure investment. You'll have all seen the redevelopment of Wagga Hospital. Albury Wodonga Health actually needs a lot larger than that based on the analysis that we've done. We're actually looking at an additional 200 to 300 beds than what we would need. That was at least 430 million up to 600 million to develop that service. Ballarat was at least 560 and Bendigo was certainly over 630 million to build a new hospital. In reality, all of these are new facilities, all across the services. The development of that infrastructure requires a significant capital investment, and that's what we'll need support from our community to engage with. And it's not just piecemeal funding that will create band-aid solutions. Where, from a business perspective, this becomes important is we see that any health precinct that is developed, there is significant opportunities for business and retail, motel services, roads, all sorts of developments that actually leads to increased economic activity. And the studies demonstrate how much capital growth you can create through a public investment project like this. Right now, we run 2 out-of-date and out-of-capacity hospitals only 7 kilometres apart. There is no similar sized region that continues to run 2 hospitals. By having those 2 hospitals, we continue to run risks for our patient safety. And this is the key from the clinician's point of view of why we needed to push for this. We cannot continue to run that untenable risk. There is harm that can be created by running services across 2 sides. It means that you duplicate some services and you become inefficient. And then there are services that we miss out on either side of the river. So maternity located on one side, intensive care on the other. 2 emergency departments creates risk. Having rehab on one side creates risk. And it's the dangers that we face for our patients and our community that is most concerned the clinicians. And we've been fortunate so far to have the effort of our clinicians preserve that risk and mitigate that risk, but it's becoming harder and harder to do so. That creates bouncing of patients across the border from one side to the other. It means that staff have to be pulled across from one side to the border repeatedly. And that means that we have issues where we are not getting the access to care that our community needs. What we're advocating for is a large regional referral service with the economies of scale to provide those services that we talked about before. Co-location is the key to minimising the risk to our patient safety. It will also create an opportunity to attract and retain more staff, more specialists, and that's not just medical. That's nurse specialists, that's physio, that's allied health, where we have critical risks in terms of our capacity to recruit and retain. The increase in expanded services, and in terms of increasing the further opportunities, is the co-location of a private facility and an education and research facility that again can attract and retain key staff. The next step will be the master planning, and I'll pass over to Michael to go through that process in terms of where we need to go in terms of the master plan. So we've talked about what we need to do and why we need to do it. The next step is to figure out how we're going to do it.
Thanks, David. So as David said, I'll just talk about the process we're about to undertake. A couple of things just to really know about our master plan. Again, it's Matt and David said. What it is, very simply, clinical services plan tells us what services we need to deliver in the next 20 years. The master plan will tell us what infrastructure we need to deliver. So very simple concept. We are taking a whole service approach. So what does that mean? Obviously, we talked a lot about the issues we've got with our acute services, our hospitals. We also run a whole heap of community and other services right across our region. So this just won't be focused on hospital sites, it'll be focused on all our sites. We have a number of mental health community facilities or aged care residential facilities. We have sites in Beechworth. We run the mental health service in Wonderata, the acute mental health service there. So there's a whole heap of things that this master plan will cover. So it's pretty comprehensive. Again, as mentioned, this will be about the infrastructure needed to meet our future demands. Whilst we talk about single site, that again is for our acute and subacute services and other services, but we're particularly have a presence just because of the size and nature of what we do in Albury Wodonga, Beechworth, Wangaratta and all that catchment. So again, it's really important to understand this just isn't about focusing on that sort of that hospital side of things. So master plan has commenced. We've engaged a firm called Conrad Garbutt to do this for us. One of the key things that the master plan will address for us, and a number of you probably have been part of the discussions over time about whether we need to, if we're going to expand our services, particularly going to acute hospital services, whether that should be on a brownfield site, so either rebuilding on Albury or Wodonga campuses, or a greenfield site, so completely new campus. So what the master plan will do is not only identify the infrastructure we need, we'll do something called a value management study to actually look at, in terms of value for money and value for the community, what is the best option about a future site? Is it going to be a greenfield, or will we look at rebuilding on, as I say, Albury or Wodonga campus, or is there a third option? So we'll talk about this. It's a really important issue for us in terms of planning to really put that issue to bed about where is our future site. There will be lots of opportunities for contribution and feedback. We are actually currently setting up consumer user group sessions. Please contact that email address on there if you'd like to participate on that. We've also on our Facebook site got details about how people can join that group. So I really encourage you to do that. We're very keen to make sure that we do have a community voice in this process. So not only do we get the sort of view of the so-called sort of experts, but we do get a community sense of what services we need to have, where they need to be, and what the issues are in our future infrastructure and planning. We'll be doing some more detailed community briefings right through the process. This is part of that. We'll also be doing on the 8th of September an online face-to-face forum, so people just aware of where we're at and what we're doing and how it's progressing. The recommendations in terms of the final master planning will be available in November. So it is a pretty quick process. It's about 16 weeks from where we started. Obviously, as we go through the process, we'll have updates and advice about what the master plan is looking like. But in terms of the final signed report, we expect that to be due in November. I think it's, and again, David and Matt touched on all of this, but again, it's probably just worthwhile just reinforcing, you know, what this process will do for us. Hopefully, we'll expand the range of complexity. Health services close to home. That's really important, that closer to home thing. We're really keen to make sure health planners on both sides of the border do understand what the services we need in our local community are. And you know, that's sort of old saying, but you know, it's the services this region deserves. And given the size and just spread of the community we have here, there are a lot of services we should be providing locally that we currently don't. So that's a really big emphasis in terms of this process. It'll take some time to do that, but to get to where we need to get. But it's a really critical bit about making sure we do have those services that will support our region. Again, David touched on this. There's a big agenda for us in terms of making sure we do have a leadership role in health, right across training, research, and stronger partnerships. Obviously, Albury Wodonga Health has a remit, particularly in acute services and some community services, but we work in partnership with a whole series of players. Gateway Health, for example, will be a major player for us in terms of community service delivery. There's a whole heap of NGOs that provide services right across our catchment region that we're really keen to make sure this exercise includes them. And what we're doing here is not just developing a future for a future master plan and future identification of services for Albury Wodonga Health itself, but all the related health services that exist in the community. Work closely with them and we provide a real leadership role for that. And the last one is really important one. Again, David touched on this about workforce attraction and regional investment. So again, this isn't just about the benefit that we'll get from just having an extended health service itself. Obviously, one of the key attractors, and all of you will know this, in terms of people moving to a region and living there, is the issues around education and health, having quality education, quality health services. So this is really a key part of making sure this region does have the quality health service it needs to attract people to it. Just before I go to questions, obviously, just a couple of examples of what we're doing currently. Obviously, all this stuff is future focused, and even if we've got money tomorrow, to start the sort of infrastructure builds that we need to, with some years off in terms of commissioning those. So we're obviously continuing to look at what we need to do in the short to medium term to maintain and deal with the growing services we've got. So these are just a couple of very quick examples of what we're doing at the moment. We are redeveloping our ED at our Albury campus, $36 million redevelopment, funded jointly between New South Wales and Victoria governments, 30 million from New South Wales, 6 million from Victoria. So that's well underway, and I think is expected to be completed end of 2022. David, is that right? This has just been announced recently, again funded from New South Wales. We will be redeveloping Melbourne House, which is our acute inpatient mental health unit, which a number of you would be aware. Again, we're just in the beginning processes of that, so that will happen over the next 2 or 3 years. The advantage of that as well, it will free up some beds for us, where Melbourne House currently is, to be repurposed for use as general acute beds. So it also provides, again, some short-term medium capacity just to increase our bed base. And obviously, more importantly, creates a much more contemporary, purpose-built mental health facility, which is badly needed. And the last one is we've just got $5 million or so to develop some outpatient service hubs in Wodonga. So that money has been provided by both the Commonwealth and the Victorian government, and that will be happening over the next 12 to 18 months, making sure we do it. So really that's it for the presentation. Again, really keen for any questions or comments, not just about this sort of master plan, but if anyone has any questions about Albury Wodonga health and health issues generally, more than happy to try and answer your questions.
Just wondering, one of the key things obviously is funding. So there's obviously and stuff like that, and there's all those other hospital sites which is in those regions. One of the things I do, I actually work in aged care and work with I'm doing completely different departments and about funding. What is really different, what people are looking at sending patients home and the having to do with funding. That's the one.
Oh, the funding models for health are complicated.
No.
Yes. From our perspective, what we need to be doing is working with aged care providers as a great example, of just making sure we have seamless processes, and indeed we work together to make sure we've got funding to fund every part of the so-called patient journey. At the moment, I suppose from just if you like, operational point of view, we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that we do link up services properly. So when people actually enter our service in terms of, say, acute, that there's an easy pathway for them to get back to either home, into the community, to an aged care setting, and we don't necessarily do that as well as we could. So there is work for us to do about joining that up. In terms of the funding to support that, I think that does need to be sort of a whole of system approach and bit. I think what will fall out of this is absolutely some identification of the funding required to do what we need to do. But part of that partnering, I think, is looking at what does that mean for community and other services to make sure that we can match what we do with what the community needs.
Well, even operationally, I will say actually short-term support is lovely, they're fantastic. But you know, operationally, you're going to have to be dealing with two different government departments, two different government funding. Again, just we're complicated, as they say. And of course, aged care is very much a Commonwealth funding kind of issue. So you've almost got different, not only state governments, but we've also got Commonwealth as well. From hospital home is a lot of state government.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's funded from a different, as I say, different department in a different area within health. So just really quickly, just on our funding, just to be really clear about that. As Matt indicates, we are a Victorian health service, so we deal with Victoria in terms of all our funding. Even though, as you can see, capital funding comes from different states, operational funding comes from the two states, 50-50 funded generally, but that's all done at a department level. So what we get is simply comes from Victoria. So for us, it's relatively easy, in inverted commas, because we're just dealing with the Victorian department. What you're talking about is those other links to other areas where, again, there's all sorts of pots of money that sit in different states, different departments, and it's about how we can sensibly link that together. I think part of the regional role we want to play is actually a broker for that. So instead of us just sort of talking about what we need, we're actually talking about what the complete system needs, and we can actually lobby together on how we access that. health funding is complex, and sometimes it's a bit counterproductive. You know, you'll find mental health's a great example. There's a lot of money in mental health at the moment because of all the stuff that's happened, bushfires and obviously COVID and all that sort of stuff. But it comes from all sorts of different sources. So there's a real risk that whilst we have all this mental health money pouring in, we're actually duplicating effort, and we're not actually making sure that's going to the right place. So again, part of our role as part of this is to try and make sure that that's connected in a much better way. It's not easy, I suppose.
Alice.
Thank you for the presentation. Great to see people who are passionate and really understand what we're talking about and done a lot of research. So thank you very much for all of you. Matt touched on we need to be planning out 100 years ahead. Aubrey City is currently doing the Aubrey 2050. I'm disappointed we're not doing 2100 and beyond. You've mentioned the statistics for 2040. Can you provide us with some confidence that you'll be building a hospital that will be for 2040, but you'll have in the background alongside space for and facilities, and you will future-proof to 2100 and beyond for us? Thank you.
Yeah, so part of the master planning process is obviously to identify what we're going to 2040, but it also then allows for future development and expansion. So that will be part of the process to make sure whatever we pick as, for example, as a site, that actually has expansion capacity. So it's just not, as you say, for the next 20 years, this really needs to be about making sure we have the capacity far beyond that. Obviously, in terms of master planning, service planning, all that sort of stuff, as all of you know, the further you get out from the next 5 to 10 years in terms of data, it does become a little bit rubbery. What are the actual numbers going to be? But it's really important, particularly in terms of this process, where it's a fundamental kind of stage in the next step of development of Albury Wodonga Health that we build that long-term capacity into.
Thank you. We've probably got time for one more question. Steve, come on.
So, how does the business community get behind Albury Wodonga Health in this whole trying to push this forward? Obviously, you need everybody you can. I know that the different groups you're talking about giving, but how does the business community show that support, and what can we do as a kind of a people to help people out?
So really, and I might defer to Matt and maybe David Burke to talk about that. Just from my perspective, it is about making sure the community does understand what we need to do, and really, as a community, whether it's business community or general community, lobby for the resourcing we need to actually deliver on this. I think one of the things that's probably really important to understand is we have no money to deliver on the master plan. So we'll do this, and then the process of actually then attracting funding starts. We can do lots of things from a bureaucratic level in terms of, lobbying the department, talking to both departments. Certainly the board will have their processes of talking to ministers and others. Clinicians will have their role in making sure that their voice is heard. But to be honest, the thing that will actually make sure that we get investment is if the community demands this. And I think I wasn't here at the time, but you've all had the experience of the cancer centre, where there was a great coming together. I've seen that photo, the heart in the middle of the Murray. I think that's a good example of when the community gets together, understands what the issues are, and then supports that, you can get things to happen much quicker. This is a significant investment potentially for government on both sides, and potentially federally. So it's not the case of just saying, well, we've got a good case. Every health service in Australia will have a good case for developing the health service. We really need to make sure that the community understands the difficult situation we're in and the need that we need to grow our service and actually get behind it. And we'll be working, I should have just introduced Michelle Hudson, who is comms manager. We'll be working with all our stakeholders to actually assist us in how we actually promote. So you'll hear more on that. I don't know if you
Matt wanted to quickly say
Thanks,
something.
Lisa. Only model like this in Australia. There's only other one in the world, is on the US-Canadian border, where we have two states either side of a river that delivers health services. So in Australia, we're very unique. And in Martin Foley's own words, when I talked to him on Zoom, he said, I've got to get my head around Albury Wodonga. I just don't understand how it works. And at least he admitted that he doesn't know how it works. And that's what I thought was funny. I thought it's also serious. He needs to get up and come over here, COVID, restrictions not hanging around, and have a look, and we can explain to him what it is we do. There's a lot of visitations from New South Wales, from the Premier down, thanks to the good old Justin over there. but we need the Victorian side to come to the party as well. And I know they've got their issues with COVID, so to speak, but at the end of the day, we're all about our community and making it grow and being successful. And yeah, we will need really support. We have to go to the model like the cancer centre, where we make it hard, have surgeons being operated on the causeway. We don't want to go that far, but that's where it will end up going to, because we really have to have this. We can't keep putting it off in the too hard to do basket. And yes, it's got to go beyond the next 50 or 100 years.
Thanks, Matt. Round of applause, thank you. David and Michael, obviously really important insights for the community, and we'll do what we can to help in that promotion and community involvement. Just very quickly, I know that time is precious. We will endeavour to reschedule RSM or have their presentation available online, so we'll get that to you. Again, we apologise for that. Upcoming events, YBE have an event next Thursday, the 19th. They've had to sort of change the format. It's a Twin Cities event now, so there'll be committee members on either side of the border at a venue. You can check out our webpage to find out details about that. Business after hours will be held at Heath in Wodonga on Wednesday, the 25th of August from 7:30. And our business women are hosting a cocktails and convos night at Temperance in General. That's Friday, the 27th of August. Just quickly, we've got an opportunity to support a fellow member through a fellow member. You can all do that by going and having a free coffee after this at the Real Florist. Thanks to Clayton and the team at Business Advisors. They're going to pick up the tab at the end. So don't forget to go around there and do that. And other than that, I think that's it. So thank you.